Hello and welcome to a new episode of Starkstruck, a podcast in which we talk about things we like, technology in general, and blockchains and ZK rollups in specific. Today I'm with Fran Algaba. Hello, Fran. Thank you for joining.
Hello, Henri. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. So, Fran, can you tell us a bit more about what it is you're doing today? You're working at Giza, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. The moment I'm working full-time there.
So what do you do at Giza and what is Giza doing?
Yes. At Giza, I'm one of the co-founders. I started working on Giza on April 2022. Actually, when I went to the ETH Amsterdam hackathon, the first one that was organized by Starknet there. And that's where I started digging into the idea of what happens if you mix machine learning models with the Stark's technology in order to make verifiable inference. And got into some interesting results, and that's where the initial idea of Giza started, and I started to iterate, elaborate a more complex operations. And basically the idea behind Giza is how can we create verifiable inferences for trained machine learning models, as well as deploy these Cairo programs that are models into Starknet.
Wonderful, thank you. And so you're on the technical side at Giza?
Yes.
Nice. Okay, cool. So we'll get back to that. I definitely want to hear I want to hear what was your project at the Starkathon and what you built there. And I want to understand how you got to, how was the process to start Giza. But let's backtrack a little bit and first talk about what's your background? What did you study initially, or what was your first steps in technology in general, let's say?
Yeah, I study computer science, but we have focus on hardware instead of software. So at the beginning, I really like to work on edge devices, but I applied to AI. So actually, my curiosity for AI started in the career, in the degree actually, and I really like the intersection.
So you studied hardware and then you went through to AI. That sounds like a big leap, no?
Yeah, in the during the degree there was one of the things that we did that was some introductory class to machine learning, and I really like the idea of what's behind machine learning and all the possibilities, and I got super interested, even though my degree was completely about hardware. And
what kind of hardware?
Especially FPGAs and Arduinos and things like that. So yeah, I started look into ways to mix up things, and that's where it got me to my first job, that is actually working on AI for an edge device that was basically a submarine for doing path planning, and yeah, it was super nice at that moment.
It's funny. I had somehow a similar path in the sense that I also studied the embedded systems, and I learned at school a little bit about AI. And at the time, it seemed like AI seemed like a great fit for hardware and robots because, at the time, robots have a bunch of sensors, and if you have to program them and say, oh, when this sensor does this, you do that, it takes so much time and it doesn't scale well. The more you have sensor, the harder it becomes. And AI is actually a great solver for that. So it sounds like it's somehow similar to what you did, or?
Yeah, actually it was pretty similar, but it was very complex in terms of the things that you start to try in order to integrate it into the hardware itself. You are super constrained in terms of resources, so it's really much about optimization and not too much about experimentation of algorithms, let's say.
I see what you mean. Okay, and then I want to hear your opinion on the parallel between programming a smart contract in Solidity and programming on an Arduino, because I don't know, it feels a bit
Oh,
similar, because in both cases, like, you want to do really cool stuff and you feel like you can do really cool stuff, but they're very constrained and you have to optimize the shit out of
yeah.
them, and they're not very stable.
Yeah, yeah. I also like think the same things. But in the terms of optimizations, I think you are optimizing for different things. For example, in Solidity, you're optimized for gas, I guess. And in the Arduino, you're optimizing for your resources, and you're like super constrained in that sense. And also, like, the speed of iteration in this kind of environment is also super slow compared to traditional programming. So depending on what you are looking for, it may be attractive or maybe not.
Understood. Okay, so sorry, I interrupted you. So you were mentioning you started working for a company doing submarines and you using AR for them.
Yeah.
Cool. So you were like coding, like essentially having something for the submarine to find path?
Yes. Basically, the submarine was like a surveillance system to control uh, oil conducts in the Mediterranean Sea. And it was like for the submarine to find what was the right path to follow the oil conduct without like trying to um, get in the middle of a rock or things like that. So
Without
yeah,
going into the middle of a? Sorry, I didn't hear.
a rock,
A what?
a rock,
A rock, yeah.
a
Yeah,
stone.
yeah, yeah. Just without crashing it, essentially.
Yes, 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 exactly.
Nice. So did you get to deploy this, or was it just research? Do you actually, can you claim that you released some wild robots at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea?
Yeah, actually we tried it, but it was much more complex than we thought because like we ran some initial experiments that we did here in Spain. But for deploying these submarines, we had to take these submarines to Italy and deploy them on the sea. And when you deploy them on the sea, it's like a complete different environment that you actually what you could simulate in your constrained environment or like in a pool or things like that. And in the end, like you have so many things that you can control when you're on the sea that basically one of the challenges that we face is that the algorithm couldn't generalize so well based the different environment that it was like facing there at the sea.
Understood. So lab theory didn't convert nicely to real life.
Yeah,
It's often the
yeah.
case. Interesting, nonetheless. Cool. So then, did you move on somewhere else? How did you keep your journey?
Yeah, after that, I keep trying on the robotics field because I really like that side of things. And then I moved to doing satellite programming, basically for imagery and computer vision, basically like meteorology satellites on how they send and receive the images and perform computer vision on that. That lasted like 1 month and a half.
Oh,
I
wow.
was so done with that.
Why?
Uh, uh, I like found that or discovered that it wasn't my passion to code in C++ in this super constrained environment. And also like in the company that I was working at, like I liked the culture as well. So it was like I thought it was the time to move on to a different thing.
Well, good on you on
And
moving on so
yeah,
fast. I feel like for a lot of people, especially early on in your career, it's not that easy to say, actually, no, I don't like that. Let me move on. And you have a lot of people who end up getting stuck for months or years
yeah.
in something they don't like. So good on you for moving fast.
Yeah, actually, like I had a very clear mind in that sense that I wanted to put my first years of in my work career to experiment and try different areas inside the software and hardware side of things to see like what is actually what I like because actually I think that when you decide to study a degree or something like you're very young and maybe you don't have things super clear in terms of what you want. So for me it was something like that and I wanted to experiment in different areas to see like what called my attention basically.
Nice. Maybe another question linked to that. So you mentioned you're from Spain. how easy is it to find interesting tech job in Spain? There's a bit this trope in Europe in general, and I'm guessing this is true for Southern Europe also, that the tech scene is maybe not the most exciting, and that there's this big brain drain going on. Like everybody moves out and goes someplace else. Is it something you consider?
Yeah, 100%. Actually, in Spain, it's super different compared to other European countries because, they don't really promote, like, for example, entrepreneurship or startup world is like more, okay, you do consultancy or you work for the government. This is like the common path for people to take. So actually, when you try to do something different, it's actually you don't have any kind of options to do it, and most people like move to another country or things like that. In my case, I decided to stay and try a bit of remote work, but yeah, in the end, like, didn't work out and had to find my own thing basically.
When was it?
I had like a common job, but in my free time, I started to do my thing, really like open source, and basically started like doing contributions to open source, and that was the thing that kept me going basically.
Nice.
At the time.
Yeah, makes sense. Cultivate your passions on the side, even if you need to do something else to make rent, which is also an important thing, right?
Yeah, of course.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. And how did you, I guess my question, I was going to ask, how did you get into crypto? But maybe the better question is, did you get into crypto, or did you get into machine learning and then you went from, how do we prove machine learning? Did you, I don't know.
It was a weird path because after my bad experience in this like satellite company, I moved on to a different field, and that was AI basically. And I started working in a consultancy firm that is actually Accenture. It is like a very well-known firm. And I started working in different AI projects. Nothing that was being built in Spain. Actually, it was more like international projects in Italy and United States. I was especially focused in deep learning and computer vision. That was like my specialty on the field. So I really liked that part. Was super interesting, but I found that almost every project that was run at that field was more like POCs or experiments than actual real world applications that you use at scale, basically.
Yeah, it's often the problem with these consultancy group for cutting edge topic. It seems like they have a lot of job, but a lot of it revolves around, hey, we could try to do this, but not a lot of things revolve around production stuff. And I feel it's been the same way for blockchain projects at big consultancy companies for years now.
Yeah, totally. And after that, I moved to another company that it was a bank, one of the biggest banks here in Spain. And I was doing again, at that time, like I moved to a slightly different role because I was like a data scientist at Center, and I moved to a machine learning engineer. So I was more into how do I actually scale the infrastructure for these ML models that are running,
So
right?
can you explain a bit more the difference between data scientist and machine learning engineer? Because I think like for most people, this is kind of interchangeable.
Yeah. For me, the biggest difference is data scientists are in charge of building the algorithms, doing exploration of the data, running different models and architectures to find what is the best suitable architecture for that problem that you have. And the ML engineer is more focused on everything surrounding the model itself, like how do you set up the architecture, how do you apply best practices to the project repositories, how do you establish like CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, how do you set up the cloud infrastructure for running models. I think that's, for me, the main difference.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, data scientists are in charge of like collecting data and making the engine work, whereas machine learning engineer would be more like architects who take care of how the engine is integrated correctly in the overall architecture of the company.
Yeah, exactly.
So you started doing that at a big bank.
Yeah, I started doing that at a big bank. A lot of constraints. They move super slow because all the bureaucracy and as you can probably imagine. And that's where I started thinking about this provable machine learning, because one of the issues that happen at this bank is that even if you are doing machine learning, you need to do auditing and traceability to all the models that you execute that could affect clients. So for example, if you have a machine learning model that is like deciding if give a mortgage or not, later on you need to explain to an auditor that, okay, why this happened, right? And you have a trace that this happened actually by the model. And it was like, in order to do this like verification, there is no actual any way to do it at the moment, right? And you have to build specific tools for that, or build or gather like a lot of data to actually verify that.
But this is really interesting because I feel like I've heard the same constraint in the insurance industry. Somebody has an insurance claim and an AI model will say yes or no, and you need to justify why. But I feel like there are two slightly different things here, and I'm curious to get your take on that. One is explaining why. Why did the model say yes or no? And the other one is providing a trace that indeed you ran it through that model that was audited. And I feel like provable code or provable machine learning solves the second one, but not the first one, right? It's still a black box.
No.
But which is more important, like the why or the audit trail, like the accountability part?
Actually, both are needed in this process. The explainability is something that usually the data scientist does with the specific libraries to understand how the actual computation is being performed. But the thing is that when you're running these models in some kind of a production environment, you're most probably running these models in a microservice. And what is happening inside this microservice, you also need to validate somehow that this computation is coming from the model. It's not some specific logic that you have inside your container, and it's nothing related to a machine learning model. Maybe it's an if else, and you need to also prove that that's it coming from the model, and then how the model computes that. So in the end, it's like a lot of hassle in that sense.
So how do big companies solve this? Is there a good way to do that, or is it just, it feels like a lot of this is waiting on the sideline to find a good solution, but not a lot gets used yet?
Yeah, for now, I think there is no super clear solution for that. What they did at that time was gather a lot of logs to um, like try to guess, yes, this is coming from the model because you see this log is coming through this line of code and actually is executing the model. But apart from that, there was nothing.
And when an auditor comes, does he ask you, oh, can you prove me for that specific claim amongst 1,000 others? Or does he say, no, I want you to prove that all 1,000 claims were processed correctly?
It's both things. You need to prove that the 1,000 inferences you did were correctly, and how these 1,000 inferences were actually like deciding the output that it generated.
Okay, I understand. Going back to like, I think it's a bit weird. I mean, it seems like in a way, like having this kind of exigence, like this kind of requirement for automated system is a bit strange to me, in the sense that when this was done by human, I doubt that auditors would go to all the employees processing the 1,000 claim and saying, explain me why you said yes, explain me why you said no, right? The people probably add some kind of guideline, something for the auditor to understand, oh, this is the path for the decision making. But I doubt that for every person, they would go and say, yeah, tell me what happened. Like, tell me the path you took to select the decision. So it feels a bit like a double standard, right? On the one hand, we have something that is much more efficient and much cheaper, but we're asking way more of it, so we can't really leverage it.
Yeah, I think also the same. But I think it's just because a machine is taking the decision.
So you think that people are wary of machine, they're afraid of machine, so they're like, I'm going to ask it more stuff.
Oh, I think it's because if the machine makes the wrong decision, you can blame the company. But if a person makes a decision, you can blame the person.
I see what you mean. Well, maybe you can blame the data scientist who programmed the machine, right?
Oh, maybe as well.
No, but it's interesting. It's in a way an extension of the trolley problem. I guess, or it's just one a bit more boring version of the trolley problem, right? I mean, what
Yeah.
happens if your model messes up? Nice. So you started getting interested into, when you were at this bank, into provable machine learning, and then what happened?
And then I got tired of this kind of super slow environment and moved to a faster moving company that actually was Adidas. And I was like the head of machine learning on that, and managing basically the whole cloud architecture and how people like use the models and scale these models for millions of people. And actually, as it's like more as a sports brand, you don't have these constraints in terms of auditing, because actually you are not sure affecting too much the user in terms of using machine learning models. It's not like you are not giving or giving a mortgage. So it was easier to iterate, and it was much better in that side.
What
And
kind of data were you looking at
yeah,
in that case? Like online store, online presence, social media, or inside like in-store data? Seems like there's a lot of data points you could
yeah,
use.
yeah. The main focus for them is on how to convert the most visits on the website into sales. So everything was oriented to that, like gathering all the user information of the people that went into the website, how many times they visit the website or a different article to optimize the price or the ordering of the items that you see on the screen, as well as the actual style of the page itself. So everything was, in that sense, managed by ML models in order to um, make you buy things easier.
Nice. While we're on the topic of the advertising, I heard this a few times that there's huge data brokers that sell your data online. Every time you visit the website, it generates data, and
Mm-hmm.
then some companies can buy it if you want. Like if they have some data on you, they can say, "Hey, I want more info on that dude." Um, is it the case? And if so, how much
Yeah.
does it cost? And if so, how can I, like, is there a way for me as a person to say, hey, I want to see what they're selling about me?
I'm not even sure. I mean, they do it. They use this enriched data, because basically when someone gets into the page, you can see like what is the IP address and a lot of different identifications, IDs, and you can correlate that with some services that are sold there that contains information about you. I don't know how they store this information, but basically almost every company uses it to enrich what they do in this sense for machine learning in this case. Like what is your gender, what is your age, and so on. But how much it costs, I have no idea. But I can imagine it's a lot of money.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's a lot of money in general, but per user, how much can it be? Like, I doubt that my data is worth more than a few euros or dozen euros, right? I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine.
maybe. I don't know
Okay,
even.
sorry. So, okay, so you were head of machine learning at Adidas for a while. Must have been interesting.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. During that time, I already started like experimenting in the crypto space, because actually this was on 2021 when I joined Adidas, but my experimentations towards the crypto ecosystem started in 2019.
How did you first hear
So,
about crypto?
oh, it was at my at work, when I had like some colleague that was, hey, look at this Bitcoin thing is going up, all up. And I was like, oh man, this doesn't look good. Maybe it's a scam. Be careful.
Yeah.
And then when I got home, I was like, okay, let's see what is this. And I started like researching, like I read the Bitcoin white paper, and it was like, oh man, this is something interesting, not a scam, right? And I started like digging more, and I discovered like Ethereum as well. And okay, like what are the difference? And I discovered like the world of smart contracts and these possibilities, and given like this curiosity for programming or software in general, like I found it like fascinating, and I started like to experiment, like building some smart contracts on Ethereum early in the early days. And
Do you remember what is the
I
first
start.
smart contract you used?
Oh yeah, the first thing I did was this tutorial that is super popular. It's like the crypto
Crypto Zombie,
zombies
yeah.
or something. Yes, yes. And I think this was a super good introduction into developing smart contracts. And yeah, from there, like I really liked the experience. So I started like to dig more into the open source community as well, and because I always like contributing to these projects and so on. So dive into hard hats, so many other projects, open source, different protocols that we're building in the open. Really like the this sense of community and always building the open from the free ecosystem. So like this was super interesting to me. So like I went super all in into this in my free time. I got like super degen at the time,
What do you
like
mean?
trying all the DeFi protocols, reading the smart contracts of these protocols, understanding how they work and so on. So
Nice.
it was super good during that time.
And following up with all the acts. Oh, neat. Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, of course. That's also funny in that sense. But then, like, it was at some point, I think it was in late 2020, that I started like wondering, okay, like, yeah, Infinity is good, but there are like so many issues in terms of scalability. And I started like, there has to be some kind of solution for this. I cannot think of that anyone is working on this. And that's when I discovered rollups and all the different flavors, like optimistic rollups and secure rollups and all the differences and technologies and stacks. And that's basically the moment I discovered Starknet. And specifically more what I really like about the Starknet was actually the technology that is underneath the Starknet, that is the Starks.
Mm-hmm.
And got super fascinated by the idea of Starks and Cairo as well. And started going down through the rabbit hole, and here we are.
Nice. What kind of like how did you start your going down the rabbit hole journey? Because if I follow correctly, this was in like 2021. It's not that there were a
Yeah.
lot of things to do or not a lot of resources to understand this thing in depth. So how did you go about learning stuff? Did you do it all alone by yourself behind your screen reading stuff and obscure forum posts? Did you ask questions to people? Like how did you go down that rabbit hole?
For me, there was two main sources when I started diving into Cairo and ecosystem. And the first one was this amazing Telegram group of Starknet core stars or whatever it's
Yeah.
called. I think it was super good in terms of building this early community and support in building things with Cairo. And also just diving into GitHub repositories that I couldn't find and all the documentation. Yeah, I think at the time the Cairo docs were actually for me they were good in terms of how everything worked internally. Also, there was a blog that I really went usually back to it. That is like Pragma's blog. I think.
Perama's blog?
Yes. I think it was super good in terms of quality of content. So I relied on it.
It's funny. I was talking about him yesterday, or oh, my voice is higher now. I think I found a way to make the volume bigger. Anyway,
Oh.
I was talking about Perama yesterday and how the guy is like, he just popped up at the beginning. wrote a lot of content about Cairo, collaborated on a few projects, and then just vanished. It's like it's really fun. And the funny part is that he had an influential part in how Cairo got to be discovered by a lot of people. Like you're definitely not the only one who went back to his writing for a long time after that. They're a bit outdated. They're totally outdated now, but it was a reference for a lot of people for a lot of time. I always find it fascinating. Like I always wonder how many ecosystem or how many industries can people have a pivotal role, and for that to last for a few months and then just poof, vanish, and we never know who that person is.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting artifact of our time.
Yeah, 100%. Like for me, I even understand like why this person left or stopped like contributing or writing things, because his content was super good, and even if it was outdated, I kept going into that because like the fundamentals were right. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
always useful to go back.
Nice. So you got into Starknet and Cairo, and then fast forward to 2022, and you went in Dev Connect to the Starkathon. Did you go by yourself or did you go with friends?
I went by myself. It was my first experience going to an IRL event for the Ethereum or whatever ecosystem, and it was super funny in terms of all the people that was there, all people working on the same ecosystem, moving things forward. So it was super enriching to me. And the Starnet hackathon as well, like was a blast for me, in the sense that I've been working in Cairo and in the ecosystem by myself for several months, and in my computer at my home, and now I go to this place and everyone there is working on the same thing, right? And it's just like, wow, yes, amazing.
Then
Amazing
you
thing.
get to talk with people, and talking, you get to,
Yes.
I mean, you can exchange so much more things. Like things take a whole different dimension, and often you meet nice people, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, 100%. Like so many opportunities appear during these events or this gathering of people that you can't even have when you're like working from home or from just your laptop or your computer, unless you go to this event.
And so, did you work on provable machine learning at that time, or did you work on something different?
I came there with the idea because I started to think about this at home. Like, okay, I think this is possible to build some models in Cairo with everything that is inside. I think it should be possible to have these probable inferences. So for me, it was more not if it was possible, but in the sense of building the model in Cairo, but more if it was possible to also deploy this model in Starnet and run the inferences there. And for me, like it was like only 2 days hackathon, so it was super like no sleeping time for building the initial version that I built. And we were two actually in the team. It was this guy that was building Cairo chess at the time.
Yeah.
He knew a lot about math, and I knew something about machine learning.
He was from Spain too, right?
Oh,
He was from Spain too, right?
yes, he was from Spain too. And we met there, and it was like, okay, let's do a team. I have this idea. Let's work on this. And yeah, he did the math part. I did the ML thing, and we like came up with some super basic ML algorithm that was like a linear regression that we built in Cairo, and we managed to deploy it into Starnet and do inferences as transaction. I was like, wow, man, this is super cool. And like when we went to the to the panel to present it, the solution, like I remember like Ghiza being there when we presented it, and he was like amazed, like, wow, this is super cool. Like, and it is open source. It's already available. Yes, you can check it, right? It was super good experience in that sense. And after that, like, I keep talking with Guilty, and now we have like a super good relationship, and we are working together. So, and super good experience.
Nice. And how did you meet your other co-founders at Giza?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started working on the initial version of Giza after the hackathon in Amsterdam. And it was like 3-4 months of working only by myself, because it was only myself, actually. And I tried to build everything related to it, not only the tech, but also the business side of things, and also try to do fundraising for the company. And it was a super crazy situation. I don't recommend to anyone doing solo fundraising while trying to build something, unless you want to die,
Burning out.
basically. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that was
these
the
are like,
situation. Yeah,
and
basically.
that's like taking various jobs at the same time.
Yeah, actually, that was what happened, because I was still at my day-to-day job, and in my free time, I kept like working on Giza, but also doing the fundraising. So basically, I was 24/7 working during, I think it was like a month and a half period, and in the end, it didn't work out. The market crashed. Everyone like left, and I was super burnt out. So I had to take some time off. And by, I think it was November, October, November, I went to a Web3 meetup in Madrid, and I met some guy that I started like talking about this idea that I wanted to continue working on, like this verifiable, basically Giza, right? And he was like super interested. He was also exploring similar ideas as well. So it was like, okay, yes, let's work together. And that's how I met my first co-founder. And after that, like my co-founder knew another guy that in this case is in Berlin, that was also thinking on these same ideas as well. So we met, the three of us, worked for a whole week on different sessions, several hours, and we decided, okay, let's move forward with this. And yeah.
Nice. That sounds like, I mean, it's a big leap, and it's not that easy to, you have your own project and then you say, hey, yeah, actually, let me collaborate with more people. Of course, you can do things differently and more efficiently with more people. And you know the saying, you go faster when you're alone and you go further when you're with people. But it's not that easy to actually let go and collaborate with more people. So in that sense, I'm curious, looking back, so you said the market was crazy, you worked a lot, spent yourself too much, then the market crashed and you recovered. If you were looking back now at this frenzy of things, what would you suggest to people who are new in the ecosystem next time things get crazy? How do they stay focused and keep their eyes on the prize and avoid burning out, essentially?
Yeah. For me, my advice will be, don't try to do it all by yourself, even if you build everything yourself. And you always need someone to rely on. And trying to be a solo founder is super challenging. And actually, like I read some article that the burnout rates of solo founders were like 80% or 90% even. So it's super hard to make it happen. And you always need people to rely on that you can trust and have like complementary skills. So even if you have all the technical skills, you need to rely on people. And it's always good to build on that.
Nice. And so going to events in real life and talking with people is a good
Yes,
way to meet to actually find
exactly.
interesting people.
Yes, I think for me that's one of the best things. Like you have to go to IRL events if you want to meet people, or be active in the community, Discord, Telegram, or whatever, and meet people. socialize is super important for these kind of things.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So right now, and we did a community call in the past about Giza. So for those listening, if you want more technical details on what Giza does and how they're using machine learning, I suggest going there and listening to it. But without getting too much into details, or maybe I don't know, can you talk a little bit about one of the main challenges I imagine when I hear about provable machine learning and models and inferences in Cairo, is that all the tooling, everything that is done in machine learning today is done in Python. So how do you move from Python to Cairo? Do you have to rewrite everything, or can you leverage part of the existing infrastructure to easily do machine learning, provable machine learning?
Yeah, super good question. Actually, we are not trying to let people to write everything in Cairo. That will be a madness, basically, for them. So what we are doing is we are building a transpiler. It's basically we let people build in Python their models, train their models, and we just use this train model that they built and to feed it to our transpiler. And from there, we create Cairo contracts based on that, and that's filling this usability gap basically.
Is it something that is specific to machine learning, or could people write smart contracts in Python and use them in could you write your whole smart contract in Python?
The smart contract in Python?
I don't know. Like you're saying that you can take your Python code and your Python model and turn it into a Cairo model.
Yeah, I mean, the model itself is not related to Python. I mean, Python is where people build their models, but actually the models are not in Python. It's just like a binary file that follows some standard internally to represent like weights, operations, and so on. So it's like a specification. Actually, this specification is in a format that is called protobuf. That is like a specification format. And we just leverage that to convert it to Cairo.
Okay, interesting. So you're using, I think you mentioned this in the community call, this is something that already exists, right? It's not something that is entirely new. You're converting the Python model to an intermediate representation, which is protobuf, which can be converted to C++ if you want to use it in different kind of an environment. So it's a representation that is made to be interoperable, and you're writing the component that will allow you to convert it to Cairo.
Exactly. Like basically we are building a new runtime for this specification. As you said, like you have C++, you have Rust, you have Python, where you can execute this specification. And now you can also do it in Cairo to have provable machine learning.
And you mentioned earlier running inferences on Starknet. So this, what you're describing, would basically allow somebody to train and specify a machine learning model, run it in Cairo, so you could run it on Starknet. What you could do also is run it off chain, like on your computer, generate a proof for it, and then send it to Starknet. I'm curious, what's your how do you see the impact of having code that can be proven client side to the architecture of Starknet, and particularly in the context of machine learning? Do you think people will do inferences on Starknet, or people will do inferences locally, prove them on Starknet, and so on?
So we're doing both things, and highly depends on what people want to build. So, for example, if people just want privacy or have super complex models, we allow them to just get your Cairo model executed off-chain, generated trace, verify in Sharp, and generate the secret proof in Sharp, and verify on-chain. And you just leverage this verification that is happening on chain to connect to your protocol or whatever you want to do, or just prove it, and that's it, and verify it. But also, like, you have the other option that is, okay, I just have this model that is not too complex, so I can deploy it on completely on chain, and I want just to deploy as a component of my protocol to leverage specific capabilities. And that's also a possibility. And the thing about this approach is that the other one is more focused on privacy, and this one is more focused on public goods, or to say something similar, it's like everything's public, so you are like building in real time, basically.
Very nice. And how, how palatable do you think provable machine learning will be to the existing AI industry versus how palatable it will be to the existing crypto industry? Do you think the people will start with provable machine learning will be crypto companies trying to build better products, or would it be people doing machine learning trying to make their product more compliance, whatever?
At the beginning, we think it's more of the first thing, where you have crypto projects trying to leverage these capabilities, because one of the things that I really like to say is like the state of the crypto ecosystem in terms of functionality is like the Web2 space was in 10 years ago, like in terms of ML functionality, right? Because if you want to have some complex functionality of a protocol, you just need to build a set of rules in order to be applied into the smart contract, right? So you can have this kind of behavior that you could have in right now in fintech companies. What we are trying to do is to fill this gap, basically, in terms of functionality. So like these protocols for the smart contracts can have also the same functionality as maybe traditional companies can have in the Web2 space. So if someone wants to do credit risk assessment or want to have NPCs for their on-chain games, they can do it. And they don't need to rely on the usage of oracles and serving your model in a cloud service to send the inferences. That's basically our proposition.
Nice. You mentioned Sharp earlier, so sending your proofs directly there will mean that this will be useful for projects both on Starknet and on Ethereum broadly, right?
Yeah, we really think about interoperability. Actually, many of the use cases that we are building are executing or being verified with Sharp, but being used in Ethereum, right? So it's actually like we are not just constrained or limited by only working on the Starknet ecosystem, so we can have also like full interoperability as well with Ethereum.
Yet another argument why learning Cairo is useful. Machine learning for Solidity contracts, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
That's nice. All right, and so when can we expect to see the first models in production?
Actually, right now we open source our framework. That's actually what runs the models in Cairo. We are heavily creating documentation examples. We have a neural network Cairo one already running. We can do probable inferences on that, and yeah, people can check it out and build their own thing. We have like some contributors already working on different algorithms, and the next steps will be to take everything that we are building there and try to deploy them on Starknet as well. But apart from also using our product itself, and that is going to be expected by the end of the year, basically.
Wonderful. All right, super cool. Fran, I think I've asked most of the questions I had. I understand better where you're coming from, where you're going. This was a really interesting discussion, so thank you a lot for that. Is there anything else you want to mention, or something you wanted to talk about that we forgot to touch on?
No, I think everything's fine.
All right, so let's wrap it up there. For people interested in learning more about Ghiza, we'll put the links in the description of the podcast, of course, and then we'll put your social so that people can take a look at what you're doing online. Fran, thank you again, and see you soon.
Thank you so much, Henri, for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Bye.